Which is better, the Moto G Power 2021 or the Moto G Play 2021? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. Hi everyone, this is Kevin here, coming at you with my comparison between these two new budget phones from Motorola. Now, both of these devices are offered factory unlocked for the US, so they will work with all major US carriers. Now, at the moment at least, they're not being offered at any specific carriers, but I'm sure they will be pretty soon. Now, one other thing I do want to mention is that there are two different variants of the Moto G Power available. There's a variant that offers 3 gigabytes of RAM with 32 gigs of internal storage, and then there's a variant that offers 4 gigs of RAM with 64 gigabytes of internal storage. This particular device is the 3 gig of RAM, 32 gig variant. Now with the Moto G Play, there's just one variant of the phone being offered, and it does feature 32 gigabytes of storage and 3 gigabytes of RAM. Now with the Moto G Power 2021, we're getting a very large display at 6.6 inches. The display with the Moto G Play 2021 is slightly smaller at 6.5 inches. Now in general, the two devices are about the same size. However, the Moto G Play does seem to be slightly larger, and that's mostly due to it having thicker bezels. Now with both of these devices, we're getting IPS LCD displays at 720p. With the Moto G Power, we're getting a PPI of 266 compared to the Moto G Play, where we're getting a PPI of 270. Both phones do feature 20:9 aspect ratios, so a more narrow but taller form factor, which is great for social media especially. And with the Moto G Power, we're getting an 83.8% screen-to-body ratio compared to an 80.6% screen-to-body ratio with the Moto G Play. So in general, I think both of these phones do feature pretty nice looking, practical designs, that's for sure. But one major difference that you've probably already noticed is that they do handle the placement of the front-facing camera a little bit differently. So with the Moto G Power 2021, we have a hole punch for the front-facing camera situated off to the upper left, compared to the Moto G Play 2021, where the front-facing camera is in a water drop notch. Now the front-facing camera on the G Power is 8 megapixels compared to 5 megapixels with the G Play. As I mentioned earlier, there are two different storage configurations being offered for the Moto G Power, and then just one storage configuration of 32 gigs with the Moto G Play, but both phones do support microSD card expansion. Now, neither of these two phones feature wireless charging, but they both do feature fingerprint sensors. Now with the Moto G Power, the fingerprint sensor is located on the power button, so we'll give that a try right now. And that was very quick. Let's give that a try one more time. Definitely very fast and responsive. And then with the Moto G Play, the fingerprint sensor is located on the back side of the phone. We'll give that a try right now. Very quick. One more time. So that was very fast and reliable. Now I do prefer having the fingerprint sensor on the power button compared to having it on the back of the phone, because anytime that you would turn on the display on your phone anyway, you'd be putting your finger on the power button. So why not have it also be the fingerprint sensor? I really hope this gets more and more popular with more and more smartphones out there, because I really feel like this is the best placement for the fingerprint sensor. Another nice bonus with these phones is that they do both feature face unlock, so yet another way to access them. Now there are definitely some major differences when it comes to the cameras on these two phones. With the Moto G Power, we're getting a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera, compared to the Moto G Play, where we're getting a 13 megapixel main camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So it is a bit disappointing that neither of these two phones do feature ultra wide angle cameras. That is a feature that I definitely do like, and again, it's too bad that we don't get that with either of these two devices. But it is nice at least that we do get portrait mode with both the rear and front cameras on these phones. Now here are the camera apps on both of them. You can see that this is how things look with the main cameras. Now with the Moto G Power, we can quickly switch over to the macro camera so you can get very up close in great detail. And then with both phones, we can go over to portrait mode to get those nice blurred out backgrounds. And then from there, we can flip around to the front-facing cameras to do the same thing. We can also turn off portrait mode. So definitely a lot of different features and abilities when it comes to taking photos and videos with these two phones. Now I already went over the RAM situation for these two phones. So again, as a final reminder, the Moto G Power is available in both 3 and 4 gigabytes, and this is the 3 gigabyte variant. And then the Moto G Play is offered in only 3 gigs. And then as far as the processors go, with the Moto G Power 2021, we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662, compared to the Moto G Play 2021, where we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 460 processor. Now I did run benchmark tests using Geekbench 5 with both of these phones, so I'll show you the scores from those tests right now. But essentially, with the Moto G Power 2021, I got a single core score of 306 compared to the Moto G Play 2021 with a single core score of 219. And then with the G Power, I also got a multi-core score of 1370 compared to a multi-core score of 1058 with the G Play. So definitely a nice performance upgrade here with the Moto G Power compared to the G Play. But that being said, I don't think the scores with the G Play are too bad at all. But what I recommend doing is running the same benchmark test on your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores to get a better idea of whether or not these phones will be a performance upgrade for you. Now, as far as video recording goes, we have the same limitations with both of these phones. With the rear cameras on both devices, we are limited at 1080p at 60 FPS. And then with the front cameras, we're limited at 1080p at 30 FPS. Another interesting thing too about these two devices is that they both feature very massive batteries at 5,000 milliamp hours. Now you'd expect, hence its name, that the Moto G Power would have the biggest battery of all the phones in Motorola's G series. But that's really not the case, considering that both of these phones have the same battery capacity. Now 5,000 milliamp hours is actually pretty extreme when it comes to battery capacity for any smartphone. So I'm delighted that not only are we getting a battery that big with the Moto G Power, but it's the same exact way with the G Play. Now the software is pretty much identical on both of these phones with Android 10, at least at the moment. Hopefully in the future though, we will be getting an Android 11 update, and then neither of these two phones feature NFC, which is certainly a bit disappointing. Now here are the boxes that both of these phones do come in, and then the items that come included are literally identical. So both phones do feature USB-C cables for charging and data transfer. They also both feature 10-watt USB wall adapters. They both feature SIM card removal tools, and they both feature literature about the two different devices. Now that we've gone over the major specifications of both phones, let's take a closer look at the hardware here. Now, I will say, in general, I do prefer the design of the Moto G Power 2021 compared to the Moto G Play 2021. I would rather have the hole punch for the front-facing camera versus a water drop notch. But in general, I do think both phones have a pretty nice design. Now, the devices are both made completely out of plastic, besides the front panels, which of course are made out of glass. But taking a look at the left side of both phones, they both feature the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. On the right side of both phones, they both have the volume up, volume down, but then for the Moto G Power, we have the power button that's also the fingerprint sensor, and then with the Moto G Play, we just have the power button. Then up top on both devices, also a very similar setup with 3.5mm headphone jacks, and then also noise-canceling microphones. And then on the bottom of the two phones, they both feature the microphone, speaker, and then the USB-C port for charging and data transfer. Then on the back side of both phones, we have a very clean finish. They are a little bit different though, obviously in color, but we're also getting kind of a more wavy pattern here with the Moto G Power, whereas the Moto G Play has a gradient finish on the back. But one thing that I do especially like with both of these phones is that neither of them pick up any fingerprints, so that's always appreciated. And then here's a closer look at the camera modules. So again, I think both phones do look really nice in general, so I'm a big fan of that. Let's now do a speed test comparison between these two phones. So we're gonna start by pulling up the camera apps on both. So 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks like the Moto G Power was faster at pulling up the camera app, but not by too much. Let's now go to Google Chrome on both phones. 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks like the Moto G Power was slightly faster at pulling up Chrome, but both devices, again, were very close. Let's now go to yahoo.com on both of them. 1, 2, 3, go. And almost identical here when it comes to pulling up Yahoo. Let's now go to engadget.com. 1, 2, 3, go. And it looked like it was almost identical in speed between these two phones. Let's now go to this article. 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks like in this test, the Moto G Play was slightly faster. So I would say in general, these two phones are actually pretty similar when it comes to performance. I do think the Moto G Power 2021 is a little bit on the faster side compared to the Moto G Play 2021, but it's not like it's a massive difference. Now I am curious how the 4GB of RAM variant of this phone does compare, but obviously I don't have that variant of the phone, so I have no way of knowing. So in conclusion, which of these two phones is the better value? Now actually pretty surprisingly, the Moto G Play does a very good job at competing with the Moto G Power. In fact, there really aren't that many reasons to get the Moto G Power compared to the Moto G Play. Really, the only benefits that I could think of are slightly better cameras, and then you are gaining a macro camera with the Moto G Power, but honestly, I think that feature isn't really that useful. I definitely would have preferred instead to get an ultra-wide camera, but again, unfortunately, we don't have that here with the Moto G Power. But when comparing the base model configurations of these two phones, they both have the same amount of storage, they both have the same amount of RAM, we're getting a slightly better processor with the Moto G Power, and a little bit of a better design when it comes to having the hole punch for the front-facing camera, but that's pretty much it. So I'm really surprised at how similar these two phones are in general, and considering that the battery capacities of both of them are pretty much the same, it's really tough to recommend getting the Moto G Power over the Moto G Play. But I'm really curious to know what you think about these two devices, so that might be another factor that contributes towards which of these two phones is the better value of the two. But as of right now, I would say go for the Moto G Play. Otherwise, go for something a little bit better than the Moto G Power, such as the Moto G Stylus 2021. That is another phone that I'm going to be covering on the channel very shortly. But I hope you enjoyed this comparison between the Moto G Power 2021 versus the Moto G Play 2021. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, but this is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next video.